This week, we welcome Chris Bush, Head of Security at ObserveIT, to the studio to discuss investigating insider threats. In the Leadership and Communications section, why so many companies fail at strategy and how to fix it, 8 things leaders do that make employees quit, the changing role of the CIO, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Security can't solve crucial problems when they have to wade through thousands of alerts a day. With ServiceNow, you can easily prioritize and respond to your most crucial business threats. That way you can go from overwhelmed to under control. ServiceNow brings security, risk, and IT together on one platform. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ServiceNow. These days, it's rarely a case of if you'll be hacked and more of a question of when. Once the attacker has passed your defenses, they cover their tracks and systematically infiltrate your network to steal information or shut your business down. You need to rethink the way security is delivered for your digitally transformed business. And there's one security solution that delivers it all, NetScout. Get visibility without borders for consistent detection, mitigation, and prevention across any network, data center, cloud, 5G, and more. Learn more at securityweekly.com/NetScout. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 143, recorded September 16th, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado. Joining me from G-Unit Studio in Rhode Island is my first co-host, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Hey, Matt. Good to be here.
Good to see you. And joining us remotely is my second co-host, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Matt. Hey, welcome from HQ, Carousel Headquarters.
Yeah, I know you had a meeting this afternoon, so we'll keep this tight for you and get you on track. We have exciting news about the Security Weekly webcast program. We are now partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider. If you attend any of our webcasts, you will be receiving 1 CPE credit per webcast. Register for one of our upcoming webcasts with Extra Hop or Salt Stack, or both, by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. If you missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them in our on-demand library at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Security Weekly will be at Hacker Halted in Atlanta, Georgia this October 10th and 11th. If you are attending and would like to sponsor an interview, please submit your interest on our conference request form at securityweekly.com/booking. EC Council is offering our listeners a $100 discount to attend the 2-day conference. Use discount code HH19SW when you register, or go to securityweekly.com/hackerhalted and register there.
Now, Matt, you can't forget about our Patriots announcement that we do typically on Monday.
Which one? Another butt whooping?
The one we do when they win, so there'll be a lot of announcements this season.
Yeah. Blowout Monday. Yeah.
It's going to be Blowout Monday every night.
For a long time. And look, my Broncos lost for a second week in a row. My Browns play tonight. We'll see if they can turn it around. Otherwise, this is going to be just a really lopsided Patriots season.
And I don't know if I should say I'm a New Yorker, so I'm a Giants fan, and it's brutal.
Wow. Where's that cigar I gave you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
right. No backsies. No backsies.
Hey, Paul, only give him the cheap cigars, buddy.
That's right. Now that's it from now on.
And speaking of our guest, Chris Bush is a dedicated and passionate security professional with more than 20 years of IT security industry experience. Chris is responsible for ObserveIT's information and operational security strategy. His prior experience includes serving as VP of Security Services at CyberReason, where he built and operated a managed detection and response service. In his prior roles, Chris has spent 13 years at Novartis Pharmaceuticals, where he served as head of security and was responsible for information security, risk, and security operations. Chris has also held senior technology positions at Ricoh Corporation. Chris, welcome to the studio and Business Security Weekly.
It's awesome to be here. Thank you so much, guys.
Now, the pharmaceutical, was that in Boston?
No, that was so headquarters, so U.S. headquarters, New Jersey, and world headquarters, Switzerland.
Gotcha.
Which I had an opportunity to live for about a year.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. It was a good gig.
Chris, I tell all of our guests, if you have an opportunity to come into studio, do it, because doing an interview in person in studio is so much more fun.
I told Paul when I walked in, mine was blown.
Yeah.
Mind blown how cool this is. Absolutely cool.
We can have cigars and do the shows.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
It's awesome.
It's so cool to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I have to be stuck in the office today, guys.
Yeah, otherwise, Jason be sitting right next to you with a cigar, and maybe not. He'd have his coffee.
He'd have his Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah, he gets his Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee.
It's awesome.
Exactly right. All right, Chris. So we want to talk insider threat. And as we were preparing for this interview, we definitely wanted to kind of start with the problem statement. I think a lot of us know insiders are a threat, but kind of lay out kind of the problem statement for a lot of organizations when it comes to insider threat.
Yeah. So the thing is that traditionally everything that we have done, right, has really been focused on external threats, right? Building the perimeters to defend against the things that are attacking you from the outside, the known knowns, the unknowns. You're on the endpoint these days. Now we're focused on the endpoint and looking at endpoint detection and response solutions, which is, or next gen antivirus, right? Next gen everything. But we really, at the end of the day, we really haven't focused internally, looking at, our employee base and how those threats kind of bubble out or bubble to the surface and become issues, breach related issues. You have data exposure issues, right? And statistically, when you look at these things, a lot of it comes from insider issues, whether it be an accidental leak or misuse of some technical, or the lack of a technical control and misuse of some technology that you have in your organization that leads to this. So really the problem is, or what we should be doing is not forget about the external. Of course, most of your, if not all of your malicious attacks are coming from there, but focus on the inside as well.
What I like to separate is your insider isn't necessarily the threat actor, but could be the individual that exposes the threat, right? Whereas externally is typically a threat actor, right? Inside you could have a threat actor, but a lot of times what we're talking about is an insider that either on purpose or by accident, right, creates some type of exposure that could become a threat, right?
Yeah, and I mean, when you're looking at external threats, right, you're looking at specific threat actors or nation states, or today everybody's talking about APTs, which
or even just people's bots running around the internet,
right,
grabbing S3 shares or whatever. I mean, that's certainly a possibility, right?
Absolutely, but the insider threat, right, is the way I'd like to. It's complex. It's a complex state because you're dealing with psychological components, emotional components, technical components, right? So it's not just a technical or security operations problem. It's holistically, it's an organizational problem,
right?
Which makes it
And guys, I mean, from my perspective as a CISO for an organization with about 1,500 employees, I look at it as you have the genuine insiders who could be malicious or be making mistakes, and then you have the fake insiders who are trying to take on someone's identity and move throughout the network as if they were that genuine insider, right? And leverage that. as a way to create a threat within the organization.
Yeah, and again, you're talking about in the latter case there, that's a more sophisticated insider, right? Mm-hmm. The key about the inside threat, what makes them, I don't want to say more dubious, but what makes it a complex situation is from a corporation or company perspective, you've already given them the keys.
Yeah.
Right? They already know what's out there, what information assets you have, what technical controls you have, what processes you have. They know how, at a very low level, they know how operate. They know that you have a security operations group or a SOC. They know that you have these technologies on the endpoint to detect certain things. So they're already operating from a privileged position, right? That's what makes this very dangerous, very complex, and you need to start really focusing on modifying the way your workflows go, your incident response plans are, and think about different technologies to bring in to kind of raise these things to the surface.
Yeah, one thing I think, being able to share information securely is huge, right? And because I think there's a lot of different aspects to this that I hadn't really considered. So last week we went through the Capital One breach.
Right.
And kind of, I think some of it was just, based on little tidbits, but, basically they found a vulnerability in a web app that they were able to grab a key, and that key was used to access an S3 share.
Right.
And there's a lot of pieces of information in there that insiders had access to, right?
Yep.
I mean, insiders, if you go just to the end of the kill chain, for lack of a better term, right? But the result of the attack, sure, an insider could have taken those millions of records, right? And taken them on a thumb drive and taken them away. Or they could have leaked maybe some vulnerability results that said, hey, that vulnerability existed in the application that gave the attackers that in the first part of, again, the kill chain, or anywhere in between. Right. And I think that's what makes insider threat, both detection and preventing against it, very difficult because, you said, Chris, users have access to all these different pieces and components.
Yeah, and if you look at the Capital One breach, I mean, it was a former employee, right, of Amazon. So they had institutional knowledge that they may not have had.
Oh, that's interesting, because they used we covered this, and I thought the vulnerability was one of the more interesting ones we've ever covered recently, certainly. They knew how to get to a specific Amazon service that was leaking the key. And when we were talking about it amongst, us girls kind of on the back end and people who do pen testing and clearance and all that stuff, we're kind of like, there's not too many of us that know that attack actually exists.
Right. Yeah. That's a shot in the dark, you get lucky. But this individual had inside knowledge, even though they weren't a current employee, they carried that knowledge over
forward,
and they made an assumption that this is something that probably, most likely, has been overlooked and hasn't been fixed. And they were right.
Yeah. Because for me, if an attacker was coming in completely blind, it's, in my estimation, a lot of work to get to first know that vulnerability is there, and then the kind of esoteric vulnerability, the other vulnerability, they let them access the key. Exactly. But it makes sense that they were a former Amazon employee.
That's right.
Yeah,
they had some inside knowledge.
Yep.
Or they could have put a backdoor into code if they were an insider and then leveraged it later.
Yep.
I mean, we saw the case with McAfee and Tanium, insiders taking data from McAfee going over to Tanium with that data. I mean, that's a really hard attack to protect against because some of these individuals have access to this data. And if they understand, as you said, Chris, how the environment's set up and what tools, they can find ways to bypass some of those and still take data out of the organization.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you look at just the IoT space, like how many backdoors are developers putting in there? How many, programmatic things that are put in there, either unpatched or, firmware driven that make it somewhat difficult to patch, or, as I said, with developers, they put it in as a backdoor to, for efficiency and
a lot of times for debugging and testing, and sometimes it's part of the application. Every time I've really dug into why the backdoor is there, it doesn't seem to me like it's anything malicious.
It's not.
There. It's because they're under the gun.
It's convenience.
And I got to do it this way, and I got to debug it and test it. I can totally see that.
What they fail to do is they go out the normal entrance and forget to shut that door.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So
yeah, those things in your CI/CD pipeline are things you gotta.
Yes.
And you have to there's no like scanner or anything. I mean, you could, but it's difficult. I think you just got to know that when you code something in to make sure that the code to remove it is already in your build chain before you almost should do it agile and do it backwards, right?
Right.
Like write the code to look for the back door and take it out, then write the back door, then test it, make sure it works, then put it in your CI/CD pipeline.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the event types, that's one of them, right? These kind of product related or programmatic related issues. But I mentioned like accidental use and misuse of controls or technologies based on statistics. Really, those two are the highest that lead to an insider situation. But then you have like fraud and data theft and sabotage and espionage,
right?
You know, which are more sexy to talk about, you know, spycraft related stuff. But you normally see those kinds of things at a nation state because they involve social engineering that carry over into some form of technical, you know, breach. But yeah, it's so sophisticated. And I think from a problem statement perspective, that's what's really missing. Like, people really haven't looked and embraced kind of the complexity of an insider, right? One, because, you know, you're dealing with your employee base and you want to trust your employee base, right? As security professionals, none of us do, but you want to. And it's very hard, you know, to kind of get that, especially in a large organization, to get that happening.
Well, I think if you think about it, trying to keep somebody out is sometimes easier than monitoring all the people that are in, because it's a really big challenge, to your point, Chris.
Yeah.
So if I think about just the scope, right? Think about the scope of what we're talking about with insider threats here for a second.
That's immense.
Where should organizations start? You know, you gave some, you know, kind of the higher level use cases, but is there a kind of a roadmap of how to solve aspects of managing insider threats?
So, yes. Great question. Complex question. It comes down to the triad that we always talk about, right? People, process, technology, whether it's security or technology or, you know, workflow. It's people, process, technology. And it's, you know, the insider threat problem isn't going to be solved by technology. It's not independently. It's not going to be solved by having good processes in place independently. It really takes a village to get this thing done. And, you know, everybody expects your CISO or, you know, to talk about security, but no one's really, from an insider threat perspective, but no one's really expecting your legal teams, your privacy teams, or HR, you know, your VP of HR to really talk about this. And the point there being is you need to make it a topic of conversation for everyone in your organization and start to put in good processes that make sense to help you understand, like employee assistance programs, right? The more you lessen, you know, the potential for disgruntled employees, the lower the probability and the lower the potential for having an insider event. So if you have good processes in place or good programs in place within your organization to do that, right, that helps, that lowers that risk. And then having a good technology in place that helps you identify and detect these activities, you know, the kind of how users interact with data helps kind of tie everything together. So it
sounds so easy.
No, everybody needs to be on board. That's the point, right? You need your legal teams, your HR teams, your employee relations teams, if you have them. We had them at Novartis. Your technical, your IT teams, your InfoSec, and your security operations teams kind of all humming along, understanding that this is a problem, and then putting that program together from people, process, technology in place to make that happen.
Yeah, so it's really got to come from the top. in the organization,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
The leaders of the organization have to say, look, this is a potential threat, something we want to protect against.
Right.
So they've all got to be in. Then you got to build the right policies and procedures in place to account for this and any other programs. And look, I think those are pretty straightforward for organizations that take insider threat seriously. I still think then there's this big challenge and hurdle on, think about the app user data story, right? How do you understand what users have access to, what data they have access to, what's normal, how do they use it? And then looking for that needle in the haystack of when they do something that's outside of that band, that technologically, that's not an easy thing to solve, I don't think.
Yeah, and that's why I think the strictly using like UEBA, which is user event behavioral analysis, falls short, because you're looking for an anomalous behavior that a user, you're baselining the behavior, you're looking for anomalies, and you're going, again, like a sim, you're going through this huge data store, and you have to have everything tuned correctly to get value out of it and be able to react to it, right? And if your security operations crew is already, if they're extended, by looking at SIM data, you add that in, and it just becomes insurmountable. That's why ObserveIT focuses on not behavior, but we have a rule set. It's fairly simplistic on the back end. It's a rule set that essentially maps user activity to how data moves throughout your organization or their interaction with data. And yeah, if you try and approach it from just trying to detect anomalies in your data flows and user behavior, it becomes an insurmountable problem.
Because what's an anomaly?
What's an anomaly?
I think that's what the SOC struggles with the most, and what I like about your kind of analogy is that you have the road to the data, right? So everyone's got to stay in their lanes, but not just that. Like, where are they coming from? Where are they going? And what are they trying to accomplish, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's, and I've been bringing this up a lot, but in a user awareness training, right? It was Ira Winkler. We were just talking about him because I was on a call for the conference, and it's more about limiting the behavior, not necessarily looking at all of the attributes of an attack. So, you could tell someone, hey, when you get a spam email, see if it comes from someone you recognize, look for looking at all these attributes,
all the
right?
bad stuff.
Where the rule, and I think this really translates into insider threat and specifically your product set very nicely, is you just have a rule. Like one rule example would be, if it's a financial transaction, doesn't matter how it comes to you, doesn't matter who's making it, here's the process that you go through. Like the transaction doesn't process till you physically talk to a person, or there's some other compensating control, right? Someone can't just call me up or send me an email pretending to be someone and have a financial transaction execute. There's some other step in there that's very clear and concise, like doesn't happen unless
that's right,
someone's here, or I call the bank and get verification or something, right? There's non-technical kind of steps that we can do.
That's right.
And that also helps protect insider threat as well, any type of threat, right? Without having to train users to go look for certain attributes, or train the SOC to go look for certain attributes in your logs to see if that happened, because one, that's too late, and two, that's really hard because there's a lot of attributes that you could look for. Whereas you focus more on the behavior and the goal, I think you're in a much better place all around security-wise.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like if you look at how coming from an EDR product, it's fairly complex because you're looking for process chains. You're looking for all right. So Metasploit.
In that case, you do have to look at the attributes.
Right. You do have to look at the attributes. But with our product, it's very cut and dry. We have a rule that says if X is executed, it doesn't necessarily matter, what the parent tree of the execution is, or what the children or the child tree of the execution is, and then whether or not information it made a connection out, it's listening for something else with a C2.
Right.
It's really this person logged in on this machine and ran Metasploit. That should never happen in your organization.
Right.
Right. So let's look at that user and let's use the timeline to see what has happened before. Let's look at what has happened, after the execution, in very simplistic terms. It's things like that.
So what's interesting is you're taking an approach that's a little more forward-leaning, right? If I think about a UEBA for a second, right? It's collecting lots of data, it's sifting through the data, it's analyzing lots of data, and it's looking for that abnormal behavior. Very reactive, kind of at the end of the process, right?
Yep.
With the rules-based engine, there are certain things you can do up front to either detect or prevent things, but then also collect additional information to see what else is going on that you may not prevent it, but you may detect it and then capture a bunch of information that's relevant for the response side. So you're moving it a little further to the front to be a little more proactive here.
That's right. So, I mean, we can be reactive clearly, right? And but being proactive is really essential. And this is Ed SCOTUS, not Ed SCOTUS, but it's eluding me. Oh, Eric Cole, Dr. Cole, has always said, look, prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. And we are a detection-based tool, right? So yeah, when talking about kind of workflow and being proactive, we have the ability to run queries. You can go in and build out, based on certain attributes, you can build out a query and then get the results. And you can hunt essentially in a tool like ours as well for insider-related activities. But we're a pure detection-based tool that kind of fits into that, detect and analyze. It fits nicely into your standard, typical incident response workflow. And it works. That's the nice thing.
Yeah, Chris,
it works.
It seems like it's detection, but giving you early warning signs and some context around it, right?
Exactly.
A lot of the things I see with analysts is that they'll get some type of anomalous behavior, but then they don't have enough context to validate whether or not it's a false positive or something real, right? So they're literally chasing their own tails. It seems like your product is actually giving these warning signs, but then giving enough context for an analyst to go in and actually have value instead of it becoming noise. You
made the pitch for me. I mean, context is key. And when you're investigating a situation, whether it's a complex, malware type situation or an insider threat situation, what analysts crave is context, right?
Well, and that's increasingly so important, right?
So important.
You could say, well, the context is developers have never deployed to this cloud platform before, right? But that could be totally fine.
Yep.
But the context behind it could be, well, that's sensitive data, or they're deploying in a way that they're basically leaking millions of records or potential to do that, right? So I think traditional methods are just keying off the fact that we've baselined something and there's something different happening. That's going to happen more and more as we all push into the cloud to some degree.
Right.
But having the context is what allows you to make a decision.
Right. When you're looking at, to that point, Paul, exactly. If you're looking at exfil, right, something executes and now is dumping data off into something out in the ether, right? Would you rather know that you have, a half a gig of information going out, but you don't know what it is, or you have 100 meg of something going out and you know exactly what it is? It's critical financial data, or it's, strictly confidential IP or user records that's leaving your organization, right? So that, contextually, that's what we're able to provide analysts.
It's so huge.
It's huge.
Go ahead, Jason.
It is, because it's ultimately affects the brand of the security team, right? Because number one, you could be identifying something that's truly an issue, or it could save you from giving the CEO a hard time because his iPhone's backing up to iCloud.
Right.
You literally could go after the CEO saying, hey, wait a minute, this is data exfiltration. And unfortunately, it ended up being his device backing up.
That's right.
Sounds like you speak from experience, Jason.
A little bit. Exactly. Context
but it's about, and it's about reducing false positives for the SOC team. They're inundated with alerts, And so if you have the context and they can make a decision about whether it's something they should address or not, and remove those false positives out of the mix, I mean, it just makes them more efficient in the SOC.
Exactly. Investigation efficiency, reducing alert fatigue, all those things are important to a security operations team.
I think what it really came down to is a lot of folks look at insider threat as yet like one more thing that I have to do, that I have to protect against the insider threat. And I think they even pigeonhole that into there is a threat actor on the inside or someone that has flipped, right? What I hear in this conversation is it's a more encompassing part. It is a huge part of your security program that you can't be without. It's just how you should do business every day.
Absolutely.
In a security context, in a risk context. You need this.
Yeah, absolutely. You have, whether you're a 100-person company or a 200,000-person company. I mean, you have, you have people who have access to information, privileged access to information that can, potentially be an avenue for a breach. Right, and you need to spin and keep an eye on that. When it's right underneath that umbrella, you really need to pivot and focus. The nice thing is,
in some cases, you need to prove that too. And there's been I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Chris, but when you said that, it triggered a thought that a lot of the, the big companies, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, that have the voice recognition, they've all, in some capacity, have been in the news about who has access to the voice data. Because there could be potentially sensitive information in there. There's information there that comes under subpoena and warrants, and those are dealt with in varying levels, right? But like, they also, at the same context, need to prove that, yes, there are people that need access to it, and yes, they were the only people who had access to it, and yes, we monitor for those anomalies, right? That's a very good use case.
And by the way,
threat.
We've classified the data so we know exactly how important it is to the company, which never happens, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like,
and how do they know what in that case? How do they know
they have no idea
what they're storing?
That's why, like, you look at a DLP solution. Well, DLPs are great, idealistically, if they work exactly, if you take that wild horse and you've spent the time to tame it, and now you can ride it, perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
Under perfect conditions.
It's
like my software. Perfect conditions.
Perfect conditions, right? We've classified all of our unstructured data, all of our structured data. We know exactly who has access to it. We have a great configuration management program in place, so we know what changes are legitimate. We know what changes aren't. And, it's great. That piece of data just left the organization. That's a problem. Or we prevented it from
happening. And it's multi-level. Much of the press has been focused around the analysts who have access to, let's say, the voice records, right, or transcriptions from these devices. But what about the people who administer the systems that collect that information, the people who administer the systems that store it, right? It's it goes multiple levels deep.
Right. Yeah, that's a problem. Absolutely.
So Chris, just for our listeners, do you have any advice, golden nuggets, anything that our listeners can take back to really starting a very mature or progressing insider threat program, and anything that our listeners can take home and really start moving that forward?
Yeah. So, great question. So it all depends on your resource, your budget, what you have available. We know that security is strapped. It gets a lot of attention, but the budgets never are commensurate with the risks typically. But if you have cycles, if you have the ability to do so, and this doesn't take much, if you can get your leadership teams and your executives involved, start setting that tone, have them, educate them. Let them know that all of our threats aren't just, outside our perimeter, that the perimeter has now become the individual in today's day and age. Data is, it goes everywhere, it traverses everything, it's stored who knows where, and your employees are carrying that. So start with developing a small program, by massaging and adjusting your policy base and your procedural base, right? Then look into a technology that can help support that, so that you're automating a lot of that stuff, right? Because if you keep running down that manual rabbit hole, you're in the same situation, right? You're going to handcuff yourself. So look for a tech that can help you, and move slow, but realize that it's a problem. That's really I would say if you could take one thing away from this, realize it's a problem, go back, look at how you can adjust your policies, and get your executives on board to recognize that this is, something that you need to pay attention to. Look, Verizon, they put that breach report out every year, and this is the first time they spun off that breach report. What was it, 2018, where they focused on insider threat. Forrester has just deemed this Insider Threat Awareness Month. It's starting to catch on.
Well, because it can undermine really any other measures you're putting in place.
Yeah, if everything's focused on the outside and you have something going on.
I also think, and this is a little out there, but like more people in all these organizations have access to technology. I think more so than in the past 20 years, certainly. Everyone's got a piece of technology, right? I mean, it used to be in larger organizations that people in the back office, right, were the ones you had to worry about. So it was a much smaller subsection even of the organization. Now I feel like if you've got a company of any size, with the size you gave, like a couple hundred employees up to 200,000, right? Conceivably, every single employee in your organization has access to technology that conceivably could have access to something or
and out of convenience. Look, it's not always about being malicious. It's about I just joined a company and I want to hit the ground running. So what do? You take what you did at your last company because you think you own it. You took it to your new company. So now you're at 60 miles an hour rather than 0. And you're doing that, or you're an overachiever and you want to work.
That's a fine line too, though.
Yeah, it's a fine line, and you want to be at 200% for your employer, and you're out of convenience. You're dropping stuff on USBs, and now you got to travel, and your bag spills over, and it's now under the seat in front of you. And you leave it behind, right? It's not always malicious, and to your point, it can happen with a 100-person company or 200,000. It's just something you start to need to think about.
I mean, everyone touches technology today in your organization.
Everybody.
Right, down to, I don't know, you have people in the field in whatever industry you're in, right? Many of them, as we learned, there might have been an interview last week, that there's millions, 50 million or something, internal apps that are developed for organizations, primarily so that the folks in the retail space, the folks in the warehouse, the folks anywhere in the supply chain have some type of technology, a tablet or phone that they have an app that they're interacting with. Right?
And that's your internal folks. And then what about your supply chain? Triggered me. What about your supply chain?
Now that
third
app
parties.
is, you got to give it to a third party, right? Because they have a supply chain, right? So now it's even further outside of your
control. And they're
control.
insiders too.
Yeah.
Because they have privileged access to your information assets.
Whereas before, that might have been paper or some other, system that wasn't as connected as we are today.
Right.
Yep. You got direct connections into your supplier networks, and everybody's using technology somewhere.
Yeah.
And everywhere pretty much.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. Awesome. Chris, I think you're going to hang on, but I want to thank you for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
It's been my pleasure. It's awesome.
Awesome. If anyone would like to learn more about ObserveIT, request a free trial, or download their no-nonsense guide to insider threat management, please visit securityweekly.com/ObserveIT. We'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.